So Steve, thank you very much. I'm handing over to you.
Thanks, Elaine. Thank you for that. I think we're good here to roll on. Before I'm going to be telling you some true stories, some preloaded, and I'll alternate them with some inspired by your suggestions to import a little bit of improv into this. But first, some ruminations on storytelling. Okay. A little over a year ago, I started visiting my mom twice a week in Fort Lee. She just turned 96. We play a word scramble card game called Royalty. And we reminisce, we trade memories and anecdotes and really little stories. And it's occurred to me recently that I think in some sense we are the stories that we tell, sort of psychically. That sort of defines us. That's almost it for the philosophical portion of this event. The last thing I'll say on the rumination side is that so life can be chaotic. The Friday before, not even talking about the news, okay? But just consider the Friday before last, we felt an earthquake in New Jersey, which maybe had never been felt before. I don't know, certainly not in our lifetime. Then 3 days later, we had a solar eclipse. I'm sorry to report that a couple of weeks ago, my favorite car mechanic, a guy named Chris Palumbo in Millburn, passed away from fast-acting liver cancer. Wonderful person. So there's a certain amount of chaos in life. And that makes me think of, in the mid-1970s, my parents took me to a writers' conference called Breadloaf in Vermont, and one of the writers who was speaking, it was the late, great Stanley Elkin, who's written a wonderful book of short stories called Criers and Kibitzers, Kibitzers and Criers, and some novels. And he walked up to the front of the auditorium with a cane, because he had been stricken with multiple sclerosis, leaned against the raised stage, took out some index cards as the other speakers like Toni Morrison had spoken and John Irving. And he looked at the cards and he said to us, life is chaos. Fiction is orderly. Any questions? And that was his prepared talk. Now he went on to give a longer talk, but it occurs to me that I think the same is true of nonfiction. I think this is, stories are a way that we try to make sense of the chaotic experience of being alive. So that's the end of the philosophical stuff, and now I'll do some stories. And to get us started, I just need a suggestion of a word or a phrase that comes to mind, anything at all, and then I'll see what that generates. Yes?
Immigration.
Immigration? Okay, that should be easy, right? Because my day job is immigration. It's almost too big. I have to pick some little nugget. All right, so, all right. First thing that comes, no, we just do the one suggestion. We'll do others later, so you'll be able to, yeah. So immigration, hold your question or comment. Recently, so my relationship with my clients has been a good one in general, almost always over the last 30 years that I've been doing my day job, I call it here, immigration law practice. But recently, I got into a kind of an altercation, which happens occasionally with a client. Invariably, they are American citizens sponsoring somebody. They tend to sometimes be difficult, not always, mostly not. But bad chemistry with this one client, and I had pretty much decided that there was a new bunch of cases that he was going to bring to me and want me to handle. But there was a certain amount of rudeness going on with the emails. And I got to a point where I was just fed up. And I basically said, unless you can stop doing this and be more civil, whatever check they were going to send me some checks, I'm going to send them back uncashed, and I'm going to decline the matter. And his assistant, who is the one I mostly have to deal with, who originally is from another country, is very pleasant, perfectly pleasant. And I spoke to her on the phone while this is all brewing, and she said, "No, I need to use you. I don't want to find another lawyer. And if the head of the company doesn't, apologize or whatever, I'm going to cry." And I said, "Look, I don't like to make people cry." So, and she, a few minutes later, she emails me. She says, "Look at the email from the guy." And he's kind of apologized in a sort of mealy-mouthed way, but, and so the end of this anecdote is, just like the rest of the day, I had gotten so worked up about this, and I had gotten to a place where I was like, kind of like happy that I was going to be maybe turning this down, because it was a fair amount of money coming in, but that would be like me voting for like self-affirmation. I was excited. So mostly I calmed down, but there was like a little afterglow where I felt like, I wish he hadn't apologized, because now I don't get to be like pure and noble. All right, so that was an improvised ad-lib. Thank you for the suggestion. Immigration. Thank you very much. All right, so now here's the first of several preloaded stories. Let's see, what's in there? So in 1982, I worked on the night shift as a video special effects animator at a production house, the now defunct Dolphin Productions, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. It occupied like a townhouse there. I was on the night shift. The animation that we did used a machine called the Scanimate, which is a large video analog computer, which back in those days was still sort of cutting edge, although real digital animation was just coming in. And the way you programmed that was to patch little wires into a patch panel. So I was, and the day shift, they handled, sort of kind of glamorous stuff, like projects like the opening of ABC's Wide World of Sports, if you remember that, or the marquee sort of animation for Saturday Night at the Movies. But on the night shift, our projects were a little more modest in the glamour department. For example, I remember working on an Italian cough drop commercial. And I can still conjure up in my memory the sound of part of the soundtrack, because when you're working on these, the crew, the editor, plays it back over and over while you're doing the animation, working on it. So I can still hear the phrase "nastiti di gola," which means sore throat in Italian. So that was the night shift. But it was the early 1980s, and when the shift was over, it was like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, and then I would take the subway home to Brooklyn, where I was living. And certainly in those days, maybe again today, unfortunately, but back then, it was not far from the Bernard Goetz era, if you remember that. And so you'd take the subway home, and there weren't many people, and you'd think, okay, you look around, is this my last ride? It was anxiety-producing. So I ended up going to one of the main owners of the company, a man named Alan Stanley, to ask for a raise so I could afford car fare home in the middle of the night. And he said to me, "Don't do that to yourself, Steve." And I was like, and he explained, if I give you more money, you're just going to feel more pressure. So I guess he was looking out for me, so I was like, all right. But he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'll give you $25 extra a week. But don't tell anybody else, because they'll all want that deal. And even in those days, that was not enough for cab fare to get, because there was no Uber, to get home to Brooklyn at night. So what I ended up doing was taking the Lexington Avenue bus down to the Bowery, getting out, middle of the night. The only people there were me and prostitutes, and then I would hail a cab over the bridge to Brooklyn. So fine. Now, the thing is, I guess, other than that, we pretty much, the crew got along with management, but there were still like vestiges of some tension that can happen. Some years, maybe not that long before I got to Dolphin, I learned that the crew had tried to unionize. And Alan Stanley didn't like that, so he had closed-circuit TV cameras installed in every room of the townhouse that Dolphin occupied. And because we were video professionals, we were aware that we were being like surveilled. But one day, one of the newcomers to our crew, a guy who back in those days was rather gnome-like, a guy named Abner Dumoff, curious, you know, a lot of curiosity in him and so on, somehow got into Alan Stanley's office, because that's where the monitors for the CCTVs were. And Alan Stanley kept the office locked when he wasn't there, but somehow Abner got in. I think he was working on an Apple computer there. And Alan Stanley wasn't there, so he took a good look at the monitors and worked out that there was a blind spot on the second floor where the training Scanimate machine was kept, where the cameras couldn't see. And he duly reported that back to the crew, and forever afterward, we used to take it in turns, particularly on the night shift, to put a chair in that spot and take naps there. So the last thing I'll say about that, so I mean, after Dolphin, I went on to the greater glamour of feature film production, where I was a production assistant, a PA. But there was more glamour there. I PA'd on Amityville 3D, that fine work of cinematic art, and Firestarter. You know, occasionally there would be tension between management and crew there too, and sometimes subversive things we would try to do to even the karmic balance. But I will say this, my takeaway from Dolphin: if you ever get the opportunity to take a nap in a place where you are invisible to the lidless eye of a suspicious management, go for it. Best nap ever. So that's that preloaded story. So now I'll take another word or phrase, anything at all, see what that inspires and do what comes to mind. Yes?
Chaos.
Chaos. Oh, geez. Chaos is a great word. What does that make me think of? Chaos. All right. I don't know why, but what's in there all of a sudden flashes into my mind. So I do D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, for you kids who are a little bit advanced maybe in age and don't know what D&D is. Dungeons and Dragons. It's a role-playing game that originally was a board game, kind of gave rise to the structure of all video games that exist today. It goes back to the 1970s, I think. I do that, I do a session, I'm a player, an adventurer, as we are called. It's like fantasy world. We do it online these days, starting with the pandemic. Used to do it in person, and my son is in that. And I just want to say, as far as chaos, what comes to mind is, so you know, like you have a DM, a dungeon master, who runs the session. He's kind of like the Elaine of the session, and think of it that way. And you know, there's a certain amount of, in this case online, electronic dice rolling to see how you do when you get into sort of altercations with, you know, various basically enemies, opponents. It's sort of magical. You can play as an elf. Currently, I'm a half-elf, half human and half elf, named Uber, O-O-B-E-R. He's kind of a surfer dude, because you can play characters a little bit. So, but the point here about chaos is that I am, and this is not humble bragging, people, I am, in fact, legitimately one of the worst D&D players, I think, certainly in this region. And the reason is because I do not read, and I have not internalized the manual, the 5th edition manual that tells you how you're supposed to play. So, you know, I've learned by doing it, but I'm, my spells are lackluster, and so on. So that's what. Thank you. Chaos makes me think of. There's a level of chaos beyond the default level that you encounter by doing D&D. So I don't know if this makes you all want to rush out and start playing D&D, but if so, great. Okay, so now let's go for another preloaded one. So about a year, 1981, so a year before I got to Dolphin, I tried to break into Hollywood. And the way this came about was I had been working before then at an ad agency in New York, and I had been doing film and video production there. And I put together what we in that profession call a reel, my reel. It's like a video resume, you know, clips of things that I had worked on, including a student film I did in college and some of the stuff I had done at Y&R, this ad agency. And I sent it around. And so I was out visiting my friend, the late, great Rich Rath in California. And I was due to come back to the New York area where I lived on like a weekend day. That was my return flight when maybe I called in on the Friday or whatever, and I found out that there was this middle manager at Universal Studios where he is one of the lucky people I sent my reel to. And it turned out his secretary said, yeah, it looks like he actually has a gap in his schedule on Monday and can see you like for a late lunch at a deli in North Hollywood. Great. So Rich, you know, convinced me. He said, you got to go for it, which I already agreed with. So I rescheduled my return flight. I wasn't working at the time, so I had like just enough money to like get me to, you know, book a room in a motel at the LA airport. And I remember the room. It was not elegant. It was there was a sink in the bedroom that was on constant drip with the rust stain, and I remember the carpet was AstroTurf, but it wasn't like high quality AstroTurf. It was like thin, kind of tired AstroTurf. But you know, fine. This is part of the adventure. So great. So I get up the next morning and put on my sport coat and the tie, you know, for the interview meeting, the lunch thing. And I make my way, you know, get my suitcase. I go to the airport, you know, car rental place. And only then, when I'm trying to rent a car, do I realize that my license has expired. Yeah. I had been living in like Brooklyn, and I didn't drive then, and so I didn't know, but I couldn't rent a car. And if you don't know the LA area, it's like everything, it's very spread out, unlike where we are now. You want to get a cup of coffee, breakfast, it's like 60 miles round trip, you know. So I'm like wondering, how am I going to get to North Hollywood when there's these two guys who I guess work there as drivers or something who overhear me, and they say, we'll take you. You know, they have a car. And so great, you know, we work out a deal. I said $40, you know, and they were happy with that. They're going to take me out there. They're going to pick me up after the interview, bring me back to the airport. Great. So let me tell you about my ride trying to break into Hollywood. The car is what I believe is called a low rider. Which is odd because it's like a Chevy, and the rear end is like jacked way up. The front end is really low. The front windshield is like a slit, kind of. There's like a chain link steering wheel that's like defying gravity with like a steering wheel in a circle of links of chain. I can't remember whether there were the classic fuzzy dice hanging off of the rearview mirror. Maybe, maybe not. But I really would be remiss if I didn't tell you the interior was done up in definitely yellow, deep pile shag rug, right? The seats, the walls, the ceiling, everything. So I'm sitting in the back and I'm bouncing around with my suitcase. And the two guys, they're Latinos, you know, there's a driver and his buddy in the passenger seat, and we're having a fine ride. We go out to North Hollywood, we get there. It's late morning because I had to grab that ride when it was available. The interview isn't for a couple of hours. So on the spur of the moment, I decide that I'm going to leave my suitcase with them. You know, it's like, we've hit it off, fine. I don't want to have to schlep it around for hours in North Hollywood. One thing I forgot to mention, the horn on the car. Whenever they hit the horn, it goes da 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 da. You know, so this is the car. So they take off, and I'm thinking, am I ever going to see them again? Will I ever see my suitcase? But whatever, it's all part of the journey. So they're gone, and I have time to kill. I walk around the main street there where the deli is. There's not that much to see, so like I walk up to spend time, into the hills. They have a lot of hills. They do hills a lot out in the West Coast, apparently. So I take a walk up into the hills. It's a warm day, so I'm a little, sweaty in my sport coat and tie, but that's fine. Finally, around the time of the interview, I make my way back to the deli. I find there's the guy from Universal. We meet. We sit in a booth like, you see in the movies, like even a deli, it's like this grand sort of booth, because God forbid you should be a Hollywood person in a deli and not have one of those big booths. And so we have our lunch, and he has my reel, and he said, I should say he's a sort of expat Brit, kind of gives the vibe of like an ex-soccer player. Gotten a little bit older. It's brightly dyed blonde hair, sort of down to here. Sort of a leathery, deep tan that is, de rigueur in Hollywood, I think. You gotta hang on to that youth, because it's all about that. So anyway, this is my guy and the Universal Studios guy. So he tells me pretty quickly when we get down to it that my reel is, he says it's really not up to snuff. I mean, he says I'm getting reels from like commercial directors, and they have a high production budget, so good production value. And I immediately see his point. I mean, it makes me wonder two things. I guess I was trying to break into production in Hollywood, but also like, why did he even meet with me? But I think in Hollywood, like, people don't like to say no, so until they have to. But so that's it. The interview's done. I don't get the job, and I'm back out on the street. And a few minutes later, at the appointed time, here comes, my lowrider ride. And the guys are in there, my suitcase is there, and I get in the car, and we ride back to LA Airport. I've got another couple of hours before my return flight, so we go to a bar, we're drinking beers, we're shooting pool together. The driver was like the shorter guy, and then his friend is like a taller, lankier guy who the driver tells me his name is Arturo. He says we call him Arturo Cevaduro, which he loosely translates to me means Art the Fart. So I'm playing pool with Art the Fart and his friend, the driver, and we're having a great time. I make it to my flight with plenty of time, and I come back to New York. And so I never did, get to break into Hollywood, but I did get that sweet ride, that lowrider ride, which is, I think in the long run more than made up for it. Yeah. All right, so that's that story. Should we try to take questions? And I'm going to take another suggestion from you guys, but do we want to feel? No? No. You thought better of it, didn't you?
No, I had a comment on my suggestion.
No, I was.
Can you comment on the migration?
Oh, yes.
What it's meant as out of context.
Out of context?
Out of context. For me, that's the summary of the immigration experience.
Okay, so should I use that as the suggestion? Yes, that's it. I heard out of context. Perfect. Well, I mean, theoretically, any story I tell should fill the bill, right? I mean, but let's see if I can do better than that. What, if anything, is in there out of context? I don't know. I'm getting a glimmer of something. What the heck is it? Something somebody said recently. Oh, that's surprisingly tough. Out of context, huh? Well, I mean, actually, I'm cheating a little because it sort of relates to immigration, my immigration practice. I do what I can to, often with most of my clients, it's fine. We in our daily grind of dealing with bureaucratic matters, I do try to get them to laugh. I'm trying to think of an example of that. No, I'm not thinking of one, but there's one guy in particular who runs a soccer coaching company. And we go, most of the guys, I have several of those types of clients. I have a niche in soccer coaching visas called H-2Bs. I guess I could go down a rabbit hole about H2B, but in any event, the banter to me is important because I can't help it. And that reminds me of something. I'm just blathering here, but that's appropriate, out of context. Blather. You know, what is more out of context than random blather? And I'm remembering that Elaine mentioned that I was addicted to improv, which I said myself. And I think that's an appropriate word. It is a kind of an addiction. It remains to be seen if it does any good. I think it can. It can have nice residual effects on your life. But when it goes badly, there's nothing worse than bad improv. There's nothing better than good improv, nothing worse than bad improv. I apologize for any context that might have had. All right, so yes.
If I can just give a brief comment on that.
Yes, of course you can. I think you should.
You're going to need to repeat it, huh?
Late in life.
Say that again, I'm sorry?
I immigrated.
Make it loud.
I immigrated to the United States late in life.
Okay.
So I didn't go to school here,
Right.
in my mid-40s. And I realized at some point that even though I speak the language well, till the end of my days, I will sit at tables in conversation where I understand every word and I have no clue what people are talking about.
Okay.
You know, the last board meeting, Tom said...
If you're going to go on, you need to come.
No, well,
I'm almost finished.
Yeah.
Just example, last board meeting, Tom said, Paul Shapiro or whoever died, and who's that? Never heard of it. Peter Shapiro. Peter Shapiro. Yeah. See, and you know that's kind of it's interesting. I look at it as a big learning experience.
Well, tell me your first name.
Birgit.
Birgit. Birgit has just said, just to repeat for the viewers at home, that she came to, she's immigrated to the U.S. I think you said relatively late in life, but has probably been here a while and definitely is more than fluent in English, but often doesn't understand, you know, what's happening in the conversation. And I will say I had that experience, although not after a long time, of being in Scotland with one of my friends who may be watching this. And although it's English, like if you get the thick sort of Scottish brogue, if you lose the thread, the syllables start to be like unconnected, and you absolutely... It took me maybe 30 or 40 years to realize what someone was saying to me when she said, yelled across the street. I had like this worker's cap. She said, "Do you want a shot for your hat?" And it's like, "Do you want a shirt for your hat?" It took me like 30 years. All right. So anyway, let me get to the last story I've prepared here. When I was a skinny 12-year-old, at the end of 7th grade, I had a scheduled fist fight with a classmate. The place was Phelps Park in Teaneck, New Jersey, 4 blocks from my house. The time was early evening on June 12th, 1967. And at the appointed place and time, my classmate, whom I will call Leon Steiner, and I showed up, saw that the referee that we had arranged to have there was present, and got ready to fight. What it was that Steiner had been tormenting me throughout 7th grade, and by the end of that year I had it, and I called him out and I said, "Let's do this thing." I think one thing that set us on the road to this encounter was that we were both on the short side, and we were 12-year-old boys, and we were starting to get interested in girls, and as is often the case with boys of that age, we tended to assess our social desirability by how manly we thought we appeared, and height always factored heavily in that self-assessment. I like to think I was half an inch taller than Steiner, but even so, we were both on the same low level of the social scale. I was kind of a scrawny kid. I was not what you would call an early adopter of body hair. Beyond that, I will say both of us like to think of ourselves as witty. I had just come out of my shell and liked to try to make kids laugh. Steiner was clever too, although his cleverness defaulted more in the direction of mockery and sarcasm. But even so, we were sort of natural rivals, right? And he had been putting me down in the lunchroom, in the hallways, in front of friends and classmates, and all right. So, as I say, we arranged to have a referee there. We were surprisingly formal. We set a date, you know, surprisingly formal about the whole thing. We might have been Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton arranging their duel, which, as it happens, took place about 10 miles south of Phelps Park, for you history buffs. But yeah, so, you know, the referee was Chucky Oriel, who had been a friend of mine since 3rd grade. I was a little disappointed to find that Chucky was also a fan of Leon Steiner, but that did make him the natural choice. As we got ready to throw down, it being a warm evening, we took our shirts off, and then, trust me, you would have seen an impressive bit of scrawn from yours truly. But, and Chucky began the officiating by wringing his hands and saying, "Really, guys, do you have to do this?" But we were grimly determined to do it, to go ahead. And as we got underway, we ended up basically, I think entirely unintentionally, reenacting what I think is the strongest scene from Akira Kurosawa's masterful film, Rashomon. And if you need a reminder what that was about, this is the period Japanese piece that features an encounter in the forest between a bandit and a samurai and his wife. The bandit, masterfully played by Toshiro Mifune, you know, fights the samurai, a sword fight. There are 4 versions in the film of how this encounter went down. All of the versions agree on some details. In all of them, the husband is tied up at the beginning by the bandit. The bandit rapes the wife, although that happens off screen, and the husband ends up dead. But there the similarities end. In the bandit's version, the bandit has his way with the wife, and in his telling, he's so charming that what starts out as an assault ends up consensual. Then he ends up having a glorious sword fight with the husband, and he kills him. In the wife's version, after the bandit has left, the husband is tied up, and he looks at her with such cold disdain that she can't bear it, and she takes a knife and tries to kill herself. And she only fails in that because she faints, and when she comes to, the husband is dead, he's been stabbed. In the dead husband's version, relayed to us by a spirit medium, the husband ends up, after all this, alone in a grove in the forest, so filled with despair that he takes the knife and kills himself. But it is the final version, the woodcutter's version, that I think is the strongest one in the film. The woodcutter has seen everything from the cover of The Forest, and he recounts, and we see on screen, a sword fight unlike any depicted elsewhere in all of cinema. The 2 men do not want to fight, but they are driven to it by the wife, who suggests that they are cowards if they don't. And as they engage, so terrified are they of getting hit and killed that they pant in their fright, they drop their swords, they trip over leaves and rocks and roots of trees. It's all just a mad scramble that is unlike any swashbuckling duel you will ever see in any other film. That just has the ring of truth about it. And so this is pretty much how it went down with me and Leon Steiner. We swung at each other mightily, real haymakers that, had they connected, probably would have caused unconsciousness. But so terrified were we of getting hit that we fought from as far apart as we could get, and occasionally a fist would whiz by a face, just grazing the tip of a nose, doing absolutely no harm. Well, it went on like this for a while until, you know, panting with exhaustion from the fear, from the adrenaline, we realized that now the fight was at an end. And it was at that point that I realized that if I hurried home, I could just catch the beginning of a once-in-a-season televised event. And in those days before VCRs, if you wanted to watch something like that, you had to watch it when it was broadcast. I said to the guys, are we done now? And I don't remember if I told them what it was that I wanted to get home to see. But the fact is that June 12th, 1967 was the air date of the Charlie Brown summer special, You're in Love, Charlie Brown. And if you need a reminder what that was about, this is the program where Charlie Brown struggles mightily with himself to talk to the little red-haired girl and tell her how much he likes her. But whenever he comes near her, he's so paralyzed that he can't speak. So this is how I ended that evening. I got home by riding my bike as fast as I could. I got home in time to see the beginning of the program, and I saw the whole thing. Now, I realize that this story doesn't have absolutely all of the elements of your classic standing up to a bully scene as you might see in the movies. But it did accomplish two things, that fight. For one thing, it has enabled me, although many years later, to see some interesting parallels between Rashomon and You're in Love, Charlie Brown. Both works deal with struggling with shame and trying to avoid it. In the period Japanese piece, this drives the two men to fight even at the risk of their lives. In the animated special, Charlie Brown is an internal struggle, and he tries to deal with the fear of making a fool of himself if he talks to the little red-haired girl, and also the fear of shame if he doesn't even make the attempt. So the Charlie Brown special actually ends on a surprisingly hopeful note, as, come to think of it, so does Rashomon. Which brings me to the second thing that that fight accomplished. After that fight, I never again got any flack from Leon Steiner, a result that makes me think that we may just be rewarded for even the most modest attempt to confront our demons. Thank you. So that's it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. I don't know if we want to do more chat, or you tell me. Who's up next? And if you're thinking it over, I have a quick thing about my mother, a memory that we like to share. Years ago, probably a couple of decades, 3 decades, we went to the Renaissance Fair, which happens in like northwestern New Jersey in the summer. And we show up, my mother, members of my family, and in the entrance from the parking lot, there's a guy in full like medieval costume standing on a low building structure, and she enters in that little space. She looks up and she says to him, "Art thou not sweltering in thine outfit?" and the best part was, without missing a beat, he answers, "Verily, good lady."
I have a question.
Yes.
Will you repeat it?
Okay, I'll repeat your question.
Your profession involves very scripted rules.
Right.
Does your love of improv have anything to do with being a contrast to what you do professionally?
Well, okay, so Elaine has has pointed out that my profession, meaning immigration law practice, or law practice generally, requires going and dealing with constantly scripted rules. Does that present a sort of contrast with my love of improv? Yes, it does. It does. And that's probably why I joke around with clients. There's some room for improvisation in the handling of a legal matter. But whatever happens there is definitely, it's a different vibe. Yeah. It's a lot more bureaucratic than ideally improv should ever be. Or in fact, the rest of our lives should ever be. So yes, hi.
Can you repeat my question
Yeah,
also?
I can, yes, go ahead.
I think I heard about you that you were going to speak, address the idea that stories shape our lives. And is that right?
Not exactly. So the question is, which is an excellent question, tell me your name?
Well, my name is Jackie Gershipson.
Okay. Jackie is asking. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that my mother is an immigrant. Was an immigrant from Russia.
Right.
And I know almost nothing about her past because she never talked about it.
Right.
And
right.
So I was curious about stories shaping our lives and all that.
Well, let me see what I could do with this. But I think we have the makings of one, at least potentially very disappointed audience member here, because I haven't delivered on what Jackie expected. Reasonably expected that I would be talking about how stories shape our lives. It was a little different from that. What I was thinking of is that stories make us who we are, which, I mean, that sounds very similar to what you're saying. I'll put it this way. Here's my take on that, okay? It's that just like as the write-up that Elaine put on the website, which I had fed to her, I've heard or read somewhere that memory is not, when we have a memory of anything, our memory, we don't remember the thing that happened directly. What we remember essentially is our constant rewriting of our memory of the thing that happened. And I think storytelling is analogous to that, or maybe one layer beyond it, which is what we choose to even notice and remember from the course of a day. I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but I think most days I'm in a sort of a gray fog and I don't retain much. You know, it must be that I'm looking at the ground, whatever. But every now and then, you know, I'll notice something and I'm grateful for it, or experience something. So I think that what we retain as our experience of life, particularly I notice this when I sit with my mother, who's 96, who was also born outside the US, is that it makes me think, not just her, but me and maybe everybody I know, psychically, spiritually, I think we are the sum total of our memories and also, therefore, of the stories that we tell ourselves and that we tell other people. So that's all I had in mind. I didn't have and I don't know if you were hoping that I would talk about something more improving about how we can use stories to shape our lives, but I think that what we end up telling as stories is a reflection of our identity, really. I mean, you know, if you really look at this closely, it's amazingly not profound. Because, you know, I mean, people that we may know who lose their memories, you tend to feel like that's particularly tragic because it may be a disconnect from the experiences that you have stored up of your life. But, you know, the more I talk about this, the less profound it sounds.
No, that's not true.
All right.
On the screen.
Yes, okay, what do we got here? Tell him yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So I wanted to add to what Steve said before. Am I breaking up? No. I wanted to add maybe to what Steve was saying before about what stories mean to us. There's always the question of what is the self? What is the soul? And I think one way of approaching that is to say the self, soul, is the two functions that stories mean to us, or how we produce stories, what stories are. And stories, I think, are things that we narrate. We're the narrator of the story. It comes from a first-person point of view. Writing in a first-person point of view, which is how some writing is done, some third person, some first person. This is first-person point of view, and we're also not with the narrator, but with the character of the story, the main character, the tragic hero at some points, the confused adolescent at some point. So stories are when we create in ourselves something that's abstract and wonderful. It's but it's something, it's a way of understanding, I think, these two concepts that people have been thinking about. For what is the soul, what is the self? And that's one way to maybe approach the answer to that, with the narrator of the story and with the hero, the main character of the story.
Can I take this back?
Try it, just go for it.
Okay. I love that comment. I can totally relate to it. An alternate set of stories I had thought to prepare to tell today was, one thing that can happen in storytelling, not so much with the stories I've told today, unless you disagree, is sometimes they reveal you to yourself in a way that you don't normally think of yourself. And when that happens and when you realize it, that's kind of a neat thing, So I had prepared a set of stories, which I'm not going to tell, we don't have time, but they revealed me to be pretty curmudgeonly, easily annoyed, and sort of developed the theme of my trying to, somebody said, grow up, you try to improve, I think Bridget maybe said, as you go on. And, I'm 69 years old. It's time I grew up. But, there's certain peevishness that can creep in, even though it's not there all the time, came out in this set of stories. And I found that interesting. So that became sort of the appeal of the stories to me, was to explore that in the stories. Yeah, I mean, another thing that's occurred to me very recently, it's like, even getting, to bring it back to that client, right, that I got angry at. I really kind of got angry. And it was like, why am I getting so angry? I'm 69 years old. And I've read Epictetus. I've read, the Stoics, and sort of groove to that. And it's like, Steve, dude, like what, when are you gonna, what's going on? Like it's time to grow up. But when you have that realization, it feels like a good moment. Like, I think that gives you a feeling that you have the possibility to improve in areas where habitually you need improvement, and you usually don't realize it. So, yeah, I'm getting that out of that last comment. Yeah, and I like the narrator, and so here's the challenge. You're the narrator and you're the main characters, if this kind of, telling true stories, and there's a potential for just self-aggrandizement. And although some of that is great, even for storytelling, the stories that I like the best, and when I can try to tell, reveal vulnerability. Because I think that's really what we relate to. If everything works out, you got no story in a way. Like if you write a novel and there's a challenge and somebody just goes relentlessly and knocks down everything and it all works out, that may be great for real life, but you got no story. Okay. Elaine, should I switch?
Okay.
Let me switch over to you.
Saves me. I find this topic fascinating, and it's kind of the theme of my current book, that the character has been inclined to see herself as a victim, that she's afraid of being abandoned, and the story that she's told herself is that she's the child of Holocaust survivors, that she grew up in an atmosphere where abandonment, losing loved ones, was an imminent threat. And in the course of the story, she comes to see that she is an active agent in her own life, but also in other people's lives, that she's not always the innocent party. And she goes from feeling guilt-stricken about what she has done to other people, how she might have hurt other people, to trying to find the balance between, being responsible to other people and not, and that they have impact on her life and don't. That all, to some degree, choose how we see ourselves, choose how we see the world around us. And I'm not sure that I do it for myself, but my character's doing it pretty well.
Should I take it back? That's cool. Isn't it cool? Like if you have characters and they start to take the story, and it's like now you get to follow them. I mean, that's what you want, right? It's like the total opposite of writer's block.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, it seems people, despite my attempt at disclaimer at the beginning of this session, we have ended up exploring sort of philosophical concepts here at Ethical Culture. Go figure. What were the odds that was going to happen? All right, so that's okay. So we can brag about that or apologize to ourselves and others as you see fit. And I don't know, maybe we should end it there.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys, everybody. Thank you.